The History of American Rock Climbing, by Derek Steeken. Modern rock climbing in Europe can trace its roots to the Alps in 1786 with the first ascent of Mont Blanc, a 15,000-foot mountain on the border between France and Italy. However, American rock climbing can be traced back to John Muir's climb of Cathedral Peak in Tuolumne Meadows, California in 1869 with the help of no ropes or protection. This climb was then followed by the first ascent of Half Dome, the most famous rock face in Yosemite, by George Anderson in 1875. He did this climb by drilling large nails into the rock so he could stand on them. At the start of the 1900s, European climbers started to make vast improvements in safety gear, and by the 1920s this equipment began to trickle into the United States. Among this new equipment, climbers started to use things such as bolts, climbing shoes, and static ropes. Dynamic nylon ropes wouldn't be introduced until after World War II, and these nylon ropes are what is used today. As equipment improved, all new levels of difficult routes that were considered to be too dangerous before were able to be attempted and completed. As the popularity of climbing increased, climbers began to expand outside of the Sierra Nevada mountain range into new regions such as Smith Rock in Oregon and Joshua Tree in Southern California. In the 1950s and 1960s, rock climbing in the United States really began to take off. The first ascent of the almost vertical northwest face of Half Dome was completed by Royal Robbins in 1957. A year after this climb, Royal Robbins' rival Warren Harding climbs the nose of El Capitan, the most iconic American rock climbing route ever attempted. They spent over 18 months working and living on the wall and 11 days on their final push to the top. In 1964, Royal Robbins led a team of 4 climbers to ascend the north face of El Capitan. This is the climbing wall that is the namesake for the modern clothing and outdoors brand The North Face. As Chris Jones said in his 1976 book, Climbing in North America, for the first time in the history of the sport, Americans led the world. In 1970, Warren Harding climbed the Dawn Wall on El Capitan. Though Harding used lots of climbing aids such as small nylon ladders and lots of bolts, it was still considered an almost impossible featuring in its day. This route was eventually free climbed, which is when a wall is climbed without the use of aids, by Tommy Caldwell in 2015, and to this day is considered the hardest big wall on the planet. The 1970s were considered the golden age of climbing in the United States. By this point, climbing began to spread out in popularity and new climbing areas spread across the nation, such as the Red River Gorge in Kentucky and Devil's Tower in Wyoming. With this new popularization of climbing, new climbing disciplines began to emerge. These new disciplines included sport climbing and bouldering. Both of these types of climbing moved the focus from reaching the summit, a cliff or mountain, to instead focus on climbing just for the sake of climbing. This new golden age also brought with it a new era of both free climbing and speed climbing routes that had been done by the previous generation. In 1975, El Cap was climbed in a day by the future legend in the climbing world, John Long. This was followed by the first free ascent of Astroman, another extremely hard cliff face in Yosemite, later that same year. In the 1980s and 1990s, the climbing of existing routes using the new disciplines of free climbing, sport climbing, bouldering, and speed climbing, went into overdrive. It is impossible to discuss each amazing ascent made in this era without spending hours and hours talking about it. Notable climbs in this era include Lynn Hill's free climb of the nose of El Cap in 1993 and her later completion of the same route in a day 1 year later in 1994, and Chris Sharma's climb of Necessary Evil, a route in northern Arizona. At the time, in 1997, this was the hardest sport climb in the world, and he climbed it at only 15 years of age. In the 2000s, a new generation of climbers took center stage and pushed the boundaries even farther than ever thought possible. Climbers such as Tommy Caldwell, Dean Potter, and Alex Honnold did daring free solos and free climbs. These climbs include things such as Alex Honnold's death-defying free solo of Half Dome in 2008 and the countless amazing free climbs Caldwell achieved on El Capitan. In the 2010s, Tommy Caldwell and Alex Honnold both reached new levels in Yosemite. Tommy completed the free solo of the Dawn Wall in 2015. This is a route that he worked on for over 7 years and is considered to be the world's hardest big wall. Alex Honnold completed the first ever free solo of El Capitan climbing the route free rider in 2017. This is widely considered by far the hardest big wall free solo ever attempted. Both of these men had amazing documentaries shot about their climbs released in 2018, and Alex Honnold's movie Free Solo won an Oscar in 2019.